Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to GEEXX Reads. Today I want to talk about the novel DShai by Joel Rosenburg, an image of which you will see here. I talked about Guardians of the Flame the last time, specifically because I wanted to talk about this book in particular. I prefer to go in somewhat chronological order, and Guardians of the Flame is his earliest works, and the books he is better known for. But I preferred DShai to the Guardians of the Flame. For one thing, this book actually has more than 200 pages. I find that the world of DShai is interesting. There'll be some minor spoilers, as usual. In this world, everyone has some sort of magic. And it is generally, it's not like, for the most part, it's not like something flashy, lightning bolts and fireballs and turning people into toads and things like that. It's more of like it enhances your natural abilities. And this isn't necessarily called magic, it's called kuzu, I think. I'm not sure how the proper pronunciation. But there's a specific number of them, and they're listed, they're called like the way of the runner, the way of the soldier, the way of the chef, the cook, the way of the farmer. And essentially all it does is it magically enhances your ability to do the things that you're kind of already good at. And actually there's little side vignettes that go through someone who uses their way. The prologue is the way of the runner. Who he is. The runners are messengers. They raise, and being able to raise your kuzu is for some people more difficult than others. It's very, very rigid. For some people, it's very ritualistic. You have to go through the motions to try and raise your ability. You raise up your kuzu, your magic, just so you can activate it and make it work for you. And everyone has different abilities. So, the way of the runner makes you run super fast. The way of the chef makes you, cook amazing dishes, do things that could be thought to be impossible, foods that are boiling hot on the outside and frozen on the inside that, make lavish pastries and impossible dishes. The way of the farmer gives you endurance and helps you grow your food, grow food better. You can, tell when best to plant crops. And the way of the soldier is sword fighting. The main character in this book, Kami, is a young man. He is Kami Kuzud. He is the eldest son of Grey Kuzud. And Grey Kuzud is the leader of an acrobatic troupe. They practice the way of the acrobat. Except that Kami doesn't really seem to be able to do that. All the other members of the troupe, have all their abilities, and they occasionally raise their magic to enhance their abilities, their dexterity, their balance, their accuracy. They juggle, they walk tight ropes, they do trapeze art, trapeze work. All these things that we see acrobats do, and they travel from town to town. Kami's never been able to actually raise his kuzu, whatever it's called. It's confusing because the name of the troupe sounds similar to the way they call the magic. So the pronunciation is difficult for me. So I'm just going to say magic and then kuzud for the name of the troupe. They're an eclectic bunch of characters. They are tightrope walkers. They are snake handlers. There's one character who is basically a strongman, but he still does, other things too. The only thing Kami seems to be good at is juggling. He could always do that. He hates tightrope walking work. He hates trapeze work. He loves his family. His father's leader of the troupe. His sister's there. His mother essentially died while he was young. The only women in the troupe are the contortionist and his sister. His sister is, I think, 14. And they're an interesting group of characters too. Grey Kuzud, his father is, despite being an acrobat and being a performer, is a very serious person. His teenage sister is a teenage girl. The contortionist, she is kind of spaced out and just says random things that don't seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, she's not crazy. She just like makes up these supposedly wise sayings and kind of blurts them out. They don't really mean anything. He has a rivalry with one of the other members of the troop. There's the strong man. There's the snake handler who he doesn't like at all. And they travel from town to town. There is also, in the world that this is, hard to tell a bit from the image, the artwork itself and stuff, but the culture seems to be influenced by the Middle East and Asia. It seems to be a blending of the two, from what little I know of those cultures. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm not an expert on either culture. That's just the impression that I get. There's also a rigid caste system. You know, there's the peasants, the middle class, the bourgeoisie, and the nobility. And there are strict rules about how they are allowed to interact with one another. Only a member of the ruling class can elevate someone above their station. I'm not sure how about demoting someone from their station. You can't get any lower than a peasant. But I'm sure if someone did something sufficiently to embarrass themselves or insult someone who was ranked above them in the caste system, they could get themselves demoted to something else. Although that too might be difficult based on the fact that everyone has their abilities. You know, giving someone who practices the way of the cook to being a farmer wouldn't really work. Unless he was just cooking for the other farmers. He would still just be a cook. You know, you can't turn a runner into a cook. You can't turn a soldier into a farmer. You can't turn an acrobat into a stonemason. But back to Kami. Like I said, he's one of the, there are similar stories by other authors about this one character who doesn't seem to have any abilities when everyone else does. Piers Anthony has a series like that, or at least a novel like that. So I've seen other books, the same theme. The main character is different, but not in a good way. They are somewhat less than others. He's still a member of the troop. He still loves his family. He takes what pleasure he can out of it. He tends to romance a different girl in different towns. He's one of those type of guys. Although they spend most of their time in Den Arosh Tai, which is where the story takes place in this one city ruled over by a particular member of the ruling class. And there's one girl there who he's been basically pursuing romantically since he was a small boy, since he became interested in girls, because they regularly come back to this one town. They basically tour the towns of the kingdom, and they come back here frequently. So that's one aspect of the story. And he has rivals for her affections, specifically people who are higher ranked than he is. And she is of a higher rank than he is. I don't remember if she's where she fits into the hierarchy of the caste system. I know I mentioned it. I don't remember if I think she's lower nobility, but they have a nice home. And her parents do not enjoy the fact that she is being courted or romanced by a peasant. The acrobats can fall into the peasant class. And it creates some tension among the family, among her rival suitors. And I think Kami is supposed to be written as a lovable rascal. But for me, he comes out as basically selfish and self-centered. He isn't really a bad person, but he doesn't really think about the consequences of his actions a lot of the time. And he has a hard time keeping his mouth shut. He's a smartass. And in this society, being a smartass can get your head cut off. As much as I love the story, I don't consider him to be a likable person. Like I said, he's not a bad person. He's just such a selfish smartass. He can be inconsiderate. He really only shows any consideration to his troop, to the people in his family. the other members of the acrobatic troupe. He's pretty much, dismissive of most other people. Even, the girl he's supposedly romancing, he's more concerned with his own rewards in that than her feelings in the matter. As the story progresses, there is eventually a murder. And that's not really much of a spoiler. It's mentioned on the back of the cover. And because of whom the murder involves, Kami is drawn into it. And he has been tasked with solving the murder. And so this basically and that takes a while. It's like halfway through the book that the murder happens. And so like it's a lot of setup, a lot of world building. But aside from the fact that that's what happens, I was engrossed in it. I really, really did enjoy it. And I did reread the book before talking about it, but I read it on like Friday, and today is Tuesday. So it's been a few days. I haven't had a chance to sit down and record in the interim 4 days. So I've, lost a couple details here and there. Like I said, I forgot Nerys. That's the girl he's pursuing. I've forgotten a few names. I've forgotten a few specifics. I remember the overall gist of the story. And the murder mystery takes a few twists. And one of the things that I liked about it is that if you're paying attention, there are lots of good clues. Going back and rereading it the second time, probably more than that, just the first time I've reread it in a while, they do drop some hints about who is responsible. And I like that, the fact that they kind of give you, they kind of lay it out there. Not only that's obvious, not until you think about it and go, until it's actually revealed, and you can go back and say, oh, I see now what they did. I see how they painted the picture. It's not something you could really solve unless you're really smart, and I'm not that smart. So it's one of those, I do like a good murder mystery where they give you hints beforehand. Not enough to necessarily solve the whole thing. Like there's some murder mysteries out there where you just have no idea until they get the reveal at the end. But I like a good murder mystery where they do give you enough hints that when it's finally revealed, you can point at them and go, okay, that's where that clue is. That's where it tells me who the murderer was and what the details of it was. So it is, in those regards, a good murder mystery too. But like I said, it takes a good while before they get into it. There is a sequel to this. It is very short. There was supposed to be a third book, but Joel Rosenberg died very suddenly in 2011. He was only 57 years old. He was young, well, compared to me. He died early and rather suddenly. So there's a lot of books that are left unfinished. Anyhow, I very much like this book. The fact that I've rambled on so long about it should give you an idea about that. Or maybe I just have more to say because I've read it so recently. I very much enjoyed the book. I'd give it like an A-. I think Joel Rosenberg is a good author. And I think he tells his stories well and does a good job with world building. And the magic system is very interesting as well, the way it functions and the way it creates the case system and functions within the case system that the culture has. As always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.